The screen of Emma Carter's phone glowed in the dim light of her apartment as headlines screamed her downfall. She whispered, "How did this happen?" Her name was everywhere, branded as a monster before dawn even broke. Notifications piled like weapons, each one sharper than the last, and every vibration felt like a strike to her chest. Twitter trended with hashtags demanding her exile, and anonymous voices hurled accusations that cut deeper than knives. Emma Carter, once celebrated for her fierce defense of victims, was now painted as the villain of her own story. Her heart raced as she scrolled through endless posts, betrayal dripping from familiar faces who had once cheered her victories. Her voice trembled. "They loved me yesterday, but today they want me destroyed." No explanation mattered, no truth could surface through the noise. Her reputation burned in the digital firestorm, and the world outside seemed to watch in silence, hungry for more destruction. The chaos was instant, merciless and unstoppable, leaving Emma Carter gasping in the smoke of her collapsing life. The storm outside echoed Emma Carter's chaos within. She sat frozen as television anchors dissected her downfall. One anchor declared, "Emma Carter's credibility is gone." She whispered, "But none of you know the truth." Her phone buzzed again, this time with silence from people who once praised her. Old friends ignored her texts, colleagues left messages unanswered, and the air felt heavier with every refusal. Emma Carter's chest tightened. Betrayal was louder than any headline. Emma Carter scrolled through old photos of award nights where crowds applauded her victories. Now the same photos were being shared with captions mocking her. She said softly, "Everything I built is now a weapon against me." The applause of the past echoed like a cruel reminder, twisting her memories into daggers. She pressed her forehead to her knees, unable to breathe. The messages kept coming. Former allies who once promised loyalty now joined the mob. Emma Carter muttered, "They want me erased." Her phone lit up again with another betrayal. An old colleague, fueling the fire. Her stomach churned as she realized the mob was no longer strangers. It was people she once trusted. Outside, the city glowed indifferent, while Emma Carter's world collapsed. She whispered, "I fought to protect them, but no one protects me." The silence of those who once cheered her was more violent than the mob itself. Betrayal hung thick in the air as her reputation turned to ash before her eyes. The morning sun crept through half-closed blinds, spilling light across Emma Carter's apartment, and she stared at the ceiling as memories of her past life flooded back. She whispered, "I used to believe my voice mattered." Emma Carter remembered standing at podiums, speaking with fire for victims who had no one else. Crowds once applauded her courage, and in those moments she felt invincible. Now she lay in silence, crushed under the weight of betrayal. Her chest tightened as images of courtroom victories replayed in her mind. She had fought tooth and nail for strangers, yet in her darkest hour, no one raised a hand for her. "I was their shield," Emma Carter said bitterly. "But when my name burned, not even one shield stood for me." The echo of clapping audiences transformed into mocking laughter inside her head. The gap between who she once was and who the world now painted her as tore at her soul like jagged glass. Emma Carter's phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't hate. It was a rare voice breaking the silence. David Miller, her longtime friend and ally. His message read, "I believe you. Don't give up." Tears welled in her eyes as she whispered, "At least one person still sees me." She remembered late nights planning campaigns with him, the laughter they shared when victories felt impossible, and how he always insisted she never stood alone. But now he was one against thousands. The loneliness still pressed heavy on her chest, but the flicker of loyalty felt like a candle in a storm. She muttered, "Maybe I can survive this if I'm not completely alone." Yet even with David's support, fear clawed at her heart, because loyalty was dangerous, and she knew his defense of her could cost him everything. Emma Carter sat at her kitchen table staring at a family photo taped to the fridge. It showed her younger sister Grace Carter, and their mother from years ago. Back then, pride filled the air like sunshine. Now shame filled the silence. She texted Grace, but the message was read and ignored. The silence cut deeper than hate. "My own blood turned away," Emma Carter whispered. She wondered if Grace avoided her because of shame, fear, or a hidden resentment Emma had never seen. That unanswered question tore deeper than headlines. Emma Carter pressed her forehead against the photo on the fridge, whispering, "Do you even remember who I am?" The silence of family hurt like betrayal, amplified 1,000 times. The walls of Emma Carter's apartment felt like a prison, so she opened her laptop, desperate to remind herself of who she was before the mob. Old videos of her speeches filled the screen. She saw herself younger, fierce, standing tall, voice strong as she declared justice for the unheard. "That was me," she whispered. Her younger self glowed with hope, certainty, and belief in truth. But now, watching the same clips, her stomach turned, because those speeches were being reshared as proof of hypocrisy. "They twisted my fight into a lie," Emma Carter said bitterly. Her victories had been weaponized into the very accusations burning her down. The ghost of who she once was stared back through the screen, and she no longer recognized that woman. As night fell, Emma Carter sat by her window, the city alive with indifferent lights. Her thoughts drifted back to the first case she had ever fought. She remembered a trembling young survivor who hugged her after the verdict and whispered, "You saved me." Emma had believed that moment would carry her forever. Now, she wondered if those she defended even remembered her name. The silence of the world answered cruelly. "I gave them everything," she whispered, "and now I am nothing." The ache in her chest deepened as she realized that the love she once gave freely had left her defenseless. Her fight for others had turned into her loneliness, and the city outside carried on without her, as if she had never existed. Emma Carter stared at her email inbox, breath stuck in her throat as the subject lines glared back at her. Termination of partnership, contract cancellation, brand relationship suspended. Sponsors who once flaunted her as their symbol of justice now severed ties with cold precision. Emma whispered, "I gave them everything, and they tossed me like trash." Her heart pounded, and each click felt like ripping open a wound. She remembered glossy photo shoots where her face was their poster of strength, but now the same companies cut her loose without hesitation. "They never cared about me, only my image," Emma muttered bitterly. The betrayal wasn't in their words, it was in their silence, in their swift erasure of her name from their platforms. Her phone buzzed again, and the final blow came. The charity she founded suspended her role. She sank into her chair, gasping for air, as the foundation of her life crumbled piece by piece. The silence of friends was heavier than the hate of strangers. Emma Carter scrolled through her messages, her heart racing as she saw nothing but read receipts and unanswered texts. She whispered, "Not even a word." Photos of smiling faces from dinners and late-night talks stared back at her from old conversations. Those same people now ghosted her, their loyalty evaporating under the weight of public opinion. "You promised I wasn't alone," Emma said with trembling lips, remembering the nights they swore they'd stand by her no matter what. But silence screamed louder than betrayal. Her chest ached as she realized they chose safety over loyalty. The people she once trusted most decided she was disposable, leaving her stranded in a storm she could not weather alone. The mob wasn't done. Emma Carter's old posts resurfaced, stripped of context, twisted into new accusations. Headlines screamed, "Hypocrisy exposed." She groaned, "They're digging through my past to bury me deeper." Her hands shook as she scrolled, seeing familiar words turned into weapons. What once were moments of inspiration now appeared like proof of deceit. "They twist truth into poison," she muttered. The weight of every keystroke from years ago felt like a shackle now dragging her under. Emma Carter slammed the phone down, her body trembling as if her own history betrayed her. The fear clawed deeper because she knew the mob never stopped at truth. They fed on blood until nothing was left. The fracture in her family widened like a fault line. Emma Carter called Grace Carter again, her voice cracking. "Please, I need you." The call went unanswered, voicemail the only reply. she whispered. Even blood abandons me. The silence of her sister echoed like a judgment worse than strangers' hate. Emma's chest ached as she replayed moments of childhood laughter, the bond she thought unbreakable. Now, the absence cut like a knife. She gripped the phone tightly, as if squeezing it could pull Grace back, but all she got was emptiness. I can't survive if even my family hides, she said in a broken voice. The wound of rejection deepened, leaving her fragile and hollow. Emma Carter didn't see the knife in the shadows. Her former colleague Laura Bennett appeared online, smiling brightly as she gave interviews. Laura said, I always suspected Emma wasn't what she seemed. The words sliced through Emma like glass. Laura, who once laughed with her at late-night strategy sessions, now stood before cameras, fueling the mob for her own gain. Emma whispered in disbelief, Laura, why? She realized this wasn't silence. It was betrayal weaponized for ambition. Laura's star rose brighter as Emma's fell into darkness. The mob fed on Laura's words like fire catching gasoline, and Emma Carter's spiral accelerated. She understood now. Her downfall wasn't just survival of outrage. It was orchestrated by those who wanted her gone. Emma Carter sat hunched at her desk, exhaustion etched into her face when an anonymous email arrived with the subject line, You need to see this. Her heart pounded as she clicked. Inside was a leaked document, correspondence between Laura Bennett and a journalist. Emma whispered. She fed them the story. Each line revealed Laura's hand in orchestrating her public destruction, her betrayal sharper than any stranger's hate. Emma felt bile rise in her throat as she read Laura's words, calculated, manipulative, designed to ruin her reputation while elevating Laura's profile. Emma muttered, This wasn't just the mob. This was planned. Her chest tightened, both rage and grief tearing through her. The storm wasn't random outrage. It was sabotage wrapped in betrayal. Emma Carter scrolled further, her eyes widening as she found Laura Bennett's smug signature at the bottom of the email thread. She wanted me gone, Emma whispered. She saw Laura offering exclusive inside knowledge in exchange for media appearances. Emma's hands shook violently. Rage surged, but grief lingered heavier. This wasn't just betrayal of friendship, it was calculated ambition. Emma whispered. She wore loyalty like a mask, but behind it was envy. The realization cut her deeper than the mob's hate. Emma slammed the laptop shut, heart racing. She wasn't just cancelled. She was sacrificed. Emma Carter called Grace Carter again, desperation cracking her voice. But once more, silence answered. This time she left a message. Grace, it wasn't me. Laura set me up. She collapsed onto the bed, clutching the phone to her chest. Memories of Grace's laughter filled her ears, but they clashed with the emptiness of now. The silence wasn't just fear anymore. It felt like rejection. You'd rather believe strangers than your own sister? Emma whispered. That silence became a wound deeper than any headline. Family's absence turned her isolation into unbearable torment. Emma Carter's chest heaved as her laptop pinged again. This time, it wasn't Laura. It was an email from Daniel Ross, an old coworker she barely remembered. His subject line read, I know the truth. Emma blinked at the screen, reading his words. He explained he had overheard Laura months ago plotting her downfall with sponsors. He admitted he stayed silent out of fear, but guilt consumed him. Emma whispered, You knew all along. Daniel's confession was the missing puzzle piece. Her collapse wasn't organic, it was engineered. They were never after justice, Emma muttered. They were after me. The weight of truth crashed down like thunder. Emma Carter stood by the window, the city's neon glow painting her in fractured light. She whispered, The mob condemned me, but the betrayal began with someone I trusted. Rage and sorrow collided in her chest, threatening to break her apart. She realized the world didn't cancel her by accident. Laura lit the match, and the mob carried the fire. The silence of family, the abandonment of friends, the cruelty of strangers, all of it rooted in betrayal. Emma clenched her fists, breath shaking. I was never their villain, she whispered. I was their target. Emma Carter sat in the darkness, her body trembling from days of silence and betrayal. She whispered, "I can't breathe in this cage anymore." She slammed her fist against the table, the sound echoing through the empty apartment. Her chest heaved as rage replaced despair. For the first time, her tears stopped, and fury burned where grief once lived. Emma whispered, "If they want a villain, I'll give them the truth they fear." She pulled her laptop closer, her fingers hovering above the keys. Every part of her body shook, but this wasn't weakness. It was the storm building to break. She muttered, "I'm done hiding." Emma Carter hit record on her camera, the red light blinking like a heartbeat. Her voice cracked at first. "They told you I was a monster, but you never asked who lit the fire." She inhaled, trembling, then steadied. "Laura Bennett betrayed me. She fed lies to the mob to rise higher while I burned." Her words poured out like gasoline on dry ground. Her eyes locked with the camera, defiance sparking through exhaustion. "You wanted my silence, but you'll hear my truth." The words filled the room with an energy louder than any applause she once knew. Her voice grew steadier with every sentence. "The mob demanded my head, but I was set up. I defended victims my whole life. And when it was my turn, they left me to die." Emma's hands gripped the table, her eyes wet but unflinching. "I will not beg. I will not vanish. I am not guilty of their lies." Her words cracked, but carried a power sharpened by pain. She whispered, "They wanted me erased, but I am still here." That moment was no longer collapse. It was resistance. Across town, Laura Bennett watched Emma Carter's video climb into trending feeds. Her face stiffened as she realized her name was now tied to betrayal. Emma Carter's voice echoed online. "She built her empire on my ashes." Viewers who once cursed Emma began asking questions. Doubt seeped into the mob. Emma whispered through the video, "You followed a lie because it was louder than truth." The tide began to shift, not in victory, but in uncertainty. For the first time, Laura's mask cracked. Emma Carter collapsed back into her chair after ending the recording, her body shaking from release. She whispered, "It's out now." The weight of days of silence left her lungs, replaced with fragile defiance. She stared at the upload bar, heart pounding as if the world's judgment sat on the progress percentage. For the first time, she felt like she had chosen her fate instead of letting the mob dictate it. She whispered, "They will hear me, even if it breaks me." The video published. The storm she unleashed was irreversible. Emma Carter's video spread like wildfire, fragments of her trembling voice echoing across feeds. Some mocked her, others questioned Laura Bennett, and a few whispered that maybe they had been too quick to judge. Emma whispered, "They're finally listening." But her body trembled with fear. Listening didn't mean forgiving. She scrolled through comments, seeing her defenders drowned by critics, yet their voices still pierced through the noise. The tide hadn't turned, it had cracked. She muttered, "It's a start." For the first time in weeks, hope flickered in the ruins. News stations seized the story. A host on one channel said, "Emma Carter accuses Laura Bennett of betrayal. The truth may not be what we thought." For the first time, Emma's name wasn't dragged, but debated. She whispered, "They can't erase me now." Her heart pounded, hearing her story reframed not as guilt but as a question mark. Doubt entered the headlines. Emma pressed her palms together, fighting tears. She muttered, "Even a crack in the mob feels like air to breathe." But she knew the fight wasn't over, only shifted. Laura Bennett's shine began to fade. Brands grew cautious, distancing themselves as doubt crept in. Emma Carter whispered, "She's feeling the heat." Screenshots of Laura's emails circulated, validating Emma's claim. For once, the mob hesitated. Emma scrolled slowly, her eyes catching comments calling Laura opportunistic. "Truth bleeds through eventually," Emma muttered. Yet, victory felt hollow. The damage to her life was irreversible. Even if Laura fell, Emma's world had already turned to ash. Emma Carter sat across from Grace Carter at a cafe, the silence between them heavier than words. Grace finally spoke. I didn't know what to believe. Emma whispered, you believed strangers before me. Grace looked down, shame flickering in her eyes. Emma's chest ached, but she couldn't force forgiveness. I needed you when the world vanished, she said softly. Grace reached across the table, but Emma pulled her hand back. Their bond remained fractured, scarred by absence. Emma realized some wounds never close. Night fell again, but Emma Carter no longer felt crushed in her apartment. She sat by the window, watching the city breathe. She whispered, I'm not erased. Her name carried scars now, her reputation shattered, but she was still here. The mob had taken everything, yet they hadn't silenced her voice. She whispered again, stronger this time, I survived. The resolution wasn't triumph, it was endurance. Emma Carter's story was no longer about being destroyed. It was about still existing in spite of destruction. Emma Carter stood in front of the mirror, her reflection fractured by a crack across the glass, splitting her face into two uneven halves. She whispered, that's what they did to me. The mirror reflected not only the woman she had become, but the ghost of the woman she used to be, strong, confident, and admired. Her hair hung loose and unkempt, her eyes ringed with exhaustion, but beneath it all there was a flicker of steel. She muttered, they took my certainty, but they couldn't take my breath. The silence around her pulsed like a heartbeat, but she no longer felt paralyzed. Emma leaned closer to her reflection and whispered, I am not their villain. I am my own survivor. The words, though soft, felt like the first solid step after weeks of sinking. Her phone buzzed again, a vibration so small yet enough to make her jump. Emma Carter lifted it with trembling fingers, expecting another venomous message. Instead, it was from David Miller. His text read, I believe you. I'm still here. Emma's chest tightened, and for the first time in weeks, her lips curved into something almost like a smile. She whispered, one voice, still mine. Her eyes filled with tears as she remembered nights spent side by side with him, planning campaigns, sharing victories, and carrying defeats. He had been her anchor in storms before, and even though he could not silence the mob, his loyalty cut through the noise like light in darkness. Not everyone left me, she whispered, clutching the phone to her chest. Not everyone. Emma Carter finally stepped outside, the night air heavy with drizzle that clung to her skin. The city streets buzzed with indifferent neon, but every pair of eyes seemed to turn when she passed. Whispers cut the silence, some sharp with scorn, others laced with pity, and a few uncertain, searching. Emma whispered under her breath, let them stare. Each step felt weighted, but it was her choice to walk, not hide. She had been buried alive in silence, and this was her resurrection, fragile but deliberate. No applause followed her steps, but survival no longer needed applause. It only needed movement. And so she walked, not as the hero she once was, nor as the villain they painted, but as someone who refused to vanish. She stopped at a bookstore window, rain dripping from her hair. Inside, a clearance bin sat at the far corner, and she froze when she saw it. Her own book, once displayed with pride, now shoved among discarded titles. Emma whispered, they buried me in dust. Her hand pressed against the glass, but she didn't look away. She remembered the fire in her when she wrote those words, the long nights typing until her hands ached, believing her story mattered. Now, the world had reduced it to a relic of shame. But as she stared, something shifted. I wrote those words, they're still mine, she whispered. Even buried, her truth existed. Even discounted, it lived. Emma realized survival didn't mean restoring what was lost. It meant claiming what couldn't be erased. Later that night, Emma Carter returned to her apartment, the rain tapping her window like a steady drumbeat. She sat at her desk, laptop glowing against the dark. She whispered, they wanted my silence. This is what they'll get instead. She opened a blank page, her fingers hovering, then typing steadily. Each word was no longer for the mob, but for herself, a reclamation of voice. Her eyes narrowed as her thoughts poured onto the screen, Fury, grief, resilience braided together in lines no one could erase. The silence around her became her audience. Her final words glowed sharp on the screen. "You can burn my name, but you cannot burn my voice." She leaned back, breath shaking, knowing the mob might never forgive, her family might never return, and her life might never be what it was. But the last line stood like a monument carved in fire, unforgettable, untouchable.